Hey everyone, I have some big news for listeners in the Los Angeles area. On this Thursday, January 8th, Tonebenders will be hosting a free screening of the film F1 at the Glen Film Center. That will be followed by a live interview with the sound team behind the film. Glen Studio One is about the greatest place possible to hear a film with such a dense and powerful sound design. This is the room where some of my favorite films were mixed in over the years. Classics like Heat, The Fifth Element, and more recently Stranger Things were all mixed in this room. So come on out to the Glen Film Center at 900 Seward Street in Hollywood to hear this spectacular film, and then join me for a live Tonebenders episode recording with the F1 sound team right after the film. January 8th, doors open at 6:30, film starts at 7. Use the link in this episode's description to sign up now. You're listening to Tonebenders Sound Design Podcast, presented by Sound Ideas. This is the show where we talk with the sonic artists behind our favorite films, games, and series. As the new year begins, Sound Ideas is offering its largest sale to date. For a limited time, receive 55% off professionally recorded sound effects and music libraries. This New Year promotion applies across their esteemed catalog, making it an ideal moment to expand or update your professional collection with authentic audio and a proven standard of quality. The Sound Ideas New Year's sale is available now for a limited time, so go visit sound-ideas.com right away. Hello everyone, Happy New Year. My name is Tim Muirhead, and welcome to part 2 of Tonebenders' annual Listeners Field Recording Crowdsource. If you missed part 1, head into the back catalog in your podcast app and find episode 334. It was a great one that got a lot of feedback from listeners, and I promise that part 2 has some really wonderful and inspiring recordings for you to listen to as well. But before we do that, I want to make one last call out about the Tonebenders Screening Series of F1 the Movie happening this Thursday, January 8th in Los Angeles. It's going to be at Glen Film Center's famed Studio One, and it will sound amazing. Following the screening, we will be recording a live episode of Tonebenders with the sound team from F1 in person, including re-recording mixer Gary Rizzo, supervising sound editor Gwen Whittle, production sound mixer Gareth John, and hopefully some last-minute surprises, fingers crossed. Screening starts at 7, doors at 6:30. Click on the link in this episode's description to get all the details and to sign up to reserve your seats. Attendance is limited, so grab your spot now. I also want to take a quick moment to say thanks to everyone for listening to Tonebenders throughout 2025. It was another year of big growth for the podcast. I got to travel to all of these amazing places like Los Angeles, Mexico City, London, Denmark, all of that over the last year, and I got to meet hundreds of people that tune in to Tonebenders each week. And I have to say that the listeners of this show are the most interesting, creative, and hilarious people you would ever want to meet. The community of people working in sound is such a great thing to be a part of, and I'm thankful for it every day. So thanks for being part of this podcast, everyone. I have some cool things in the works for 2026, and I'm hoping to keep you all entertained and filled with knowledge and inspiration all year. Okay, let's get to the field recordings that were sent in by listeners a few months ago. The only way to describe this first pair of sounds is simply amazing. I've grouped them together because they both deal with water, either in its liquid or solid form. The second clip is from Dmitry Chernov, who sent his recording in from Russia. I won't say much more as to not give away the source of the recording until you hear it. But first up, we have a submission from Ronald Schmidt in Switzerland. He requested that I read the script he sent along with his recording. So although you will be hearing my voice, these are Ronald's words. Here we go. Hi, my name is Ronald Schmidt. I'm a geographer and a field recordist based in Zurich, Switzerland. Field recording has been my great passion for almost 20 years, and my field recording equipment is an essential part of my backpack on all my trips into the wilderness. I would like to share a little story about a special day on a black frozen lake and the sounds of ice. On my winter hikes in northern Scandinavia, I have often heard the fascinating and at the same time frightening sounds of ice on frozen lakes. However, the ice has always been covered with snow. So when I found out in January 2020 that there was black ice on the lakes in the upper Engadin Valley, I immediately packed my equipment and went there that very evening. The upper Engadin Valley is located in the Swiss Alps, and the lakes are nearly 1,800 meters above sea level. Black ice is the name given to lakes or on the sea when it is frozen without air bubbles, and it is therefore completely transparent and appears dark from the water underneath. It can only form if there is no precipitation during the freezing, and it is largely windless, which is not very often the case. The phenomenon of black ice is therefore quite rare. The next morning, I set off before sunrise for Lake Sills, which is about a 4-kilometer long and 1-kilometer wide lake. The black ice on the lake lay before me like a polished mirror, and the mountain peaks, which were reddish in color, and the rising sun were perfectly reflected in it. It took a lot of courage for me to take my first steps on the ice because it was as transparent as glass, and I could see the bottom of the lake below. It was impossible to tell how thick the layer of ice was, but the authorities had cleared the ice for walking on, so I trusted that it was thick enough. Standing in the middle of this large lake surrounded by snow-covered mountains, with the blue sky above me and the dark, infinite deep water below me, was an incredible feeling. And this amazing visual experience was accompanied by sounds that I have never heard before. I quickly set up and made my first recordings with standard microphones. But I soon realized that the surface of the ice was functioning like a large resonating body, and I began to experiment with hydrophones, which I used with rubber cups as contact microphones on the surface of the ice. And suddenly, the sounds were much more intense, much fuller, deeper and rounder. Sometimes it sounded like a metal plate being struck, other times like a laser gun from a science fiction movie. Sometimes the sounds felt very close, and then again they seemed to come from really far away. These sounds are produced when ice is moving, particularly when tension is released, which occurs, for example, when the sun starts to shine on the ice again after a cold night, or when there are skaters on the ice. These sounds are transmitted over long distances. Later, employees of the snow grooming service drove across the lake on a snowmobile and drilled holes in the ice with a large auger to measure its thickness. The ice was already 25 centimeters thick. They told me that once it got to 32 centimeters, they could even drive a snow groomer onto the ice to prepare a cross-country ski trail if the snow had fallen. Suddenly having a hole in the ice was of course more than I had hoped for. I asked them to drill a second hole for me a few meters further over. Now I was able to lower 2 of the hydrophones through the holes of the ice into the water under the ice to make recordings there too. In the water, the ice sounded different again, much brighter, sharper, more like crackling and cracking. My favorite recordings were made by placing 2 hydrophones as contact microphones about 10 meters apart on the ice's surface, and lowering a third hydrophone into the water in one of the ice holes. This way I could create beautiful stereo recordings of the fascinating sounds, and then the third hydrophone in the water allowed me to add some sharpness to the round full sounds of the contact microphones whenever I wanted. So I spent the whole day on the lake, so focused on making sound recordings, I almost forgot to eat and drink. In the evening, I was alone on the ice, and the sunset and the evening atmosphere once again were beautifully reflected on the surface of the blank ice. The sounds had also diminished and were no longer a jumble of fireworks, but could be more clearly distinguished from each other, which again resulted in just great recordings. When I woke up the next morning, I first looked at the lake, and all the magic was gone. Snow had fallen overnight, and there was a thick white blanket on the ice, and the surrounding mountains were barely visible in the glooming weather. I realized how lucky I was to be able to experience that last day of black ice and make these sound recordings. Whenever I listen to them, it takes me back to that frozen lake, and I will always remember that day. Finally, a quick warning: never go out on ice on a frozen lake unless it has been cleared for walking by authorities.
Hi, I'm Dmitry Chernov, a sound designer, recordist, and sound libraries creator. Today I'll show you the sound that I myself was surprised to discover. Try to guess, what is the source of it? Is it a helicopter landing? For 2 years, me and my wife and co-creator Natalia Dmitrieva have been planning to record a certain object. We chose a cold, nasty season on the edge of autumn and winter, when the nature is almost silent and no tourists and fishermen are hanging around. We traveled 2 days by car, arrived at the office of the authorities of the place, and negotiated full access to the object. Then we walked 10 kilometers on foot down a forest path with backpacks full of recording equipment, and then an hour in a rowing boat through lakes and small rivers. We arrived at the object, set up our microphones, and started our first take. Our sound object was a restored antique water mill. We opened the sluice gate to full flow and reached the maximum speed of the water wheel, but only when we were closing the sluice gate and the water wheel was slowing down, we heard that helicopter sound. The water wheel at that particular speed went into resonance and was making this deep throbbing and chiming. Now we were trying to replicate the resonance state and keep it going for as long as possible. It was not easy to control the water flow and the speed of the wheel by operating a heavy wooden sluice gate, but after some practice we managed to record a 12-minute long take of chugging and throbbing at various speeds. During 3 days at the water mill, we recorded lots of other interesting sounds, but that's a theme for a longer story.
Thanks to Ronald and Dmitry for sending those in. Those are both amazing recordings. I loved hearing both of them. If you are a regular listener to Tonebenders, you've heard me mention the O-Mini miniature omnidirectional microphones from Chris Trevino. I've talked about how I love the neutral frequency response and how they are ultrasonic capable, allowing me to really bend and shape and have a lot of fun with my recordings in post-production. Each pair of mics is handmade by Chris Trevino, a practicing field recordist and a really engaged member of the sound community. He uses high-quality components and puts a lot of work into making and testing each mic to ensure they live up to his own high standards. The O-Minis are available in both XLR and 1/8-inch versions to accommodate any kind of recorder you might have. Between their compact form and robust build quality, they work great with a variety of workflows, from everyday carry recording kits to expeditions where every gram counts and you want to keep your pack weight light. Maybe my favorite thing about both versions of the O-Minis is the price. They are extremely affordable. At $130 American for the plug-in power stereo pairs and $150 for XLR pairs, they offer a lot of value. I suggest you give them a try. At this price point, it is a no-brainer. To learn more, head to chrisatrevino.com/store or click on the link in the description of this episode in your podcast app. I want to send a quick thanks out to Chris Trevino and O-Mini Microphones for donating 2 sets of mics that were raffled off amongst those that submitted recordings for the Tonebenders listener field recording episodes. Congrats to Diego Lucumi and Lamar Samuels for winning the draw. Thanks again, Chris and O-Mini, for supporting these episodes. Next up, we'll hear a few recordings of birds captured out in the wild. These were sent in by Richard Walters, based in Portland, Oregon, Jonathon Pilon from Montreal in Canada, and then Lucas Vitale, who recorded his sound while traveling in Laos.
I'm Richard Walters, a sound recordist and editor based in Portland, Oregon. In 2015, I traveled to Palau to work on a documentary. Most of my month there was spent capturing sync sound for the film, but whenever I could steal a moment, I'd slip away to record natural ambiences. Palau is a constellation of more than 300 islands, and many of them are really no larger than a city block. It was also the site of some of the bloodiest battles of World War II, and our project was a film about recovering the remains of MIA soldiers during the war. On a rare day off, I asked to be dropped on one of these remote islands with my guide, Spies, to capture some recordings. We found ourselves sitting in an old Japanese bunker where the ground was still littered with untouched sake bottles from 75 years earlier. It looked untouched, as though its inhabitants simply disappeared. The air was thick and humid, alive with swelling insect choruses, unfamiliar birdsong, and wind spilling through the tree canopy from every direction. As Spies and I were sitting quietly recording, I heard a single haunting sound in the distance. It had a suspended, resonant tone, which really just sounded like a human whistling from the trees above. Sitting in that bunker with its wartime relics, I found myself thinking of the island's bloody history and the lives lost there. The thought made the sound even more eerie. I played the recording back for Spies and asked what it was. He told me it was called the rainbird, a bird the locals believe sings as the humidity builds before a storm. I wanted to record one that day with a better signal-to-noise ratio, but on the small rocky island with its steep cliffs, we simply couldn't navigate any closer to the source. The rest of the month disappeared into the demands of the film shoot, but on my very last morning in Palau, I planned a dawn patrol with Spies with one mission: to capture the rainbird properly. So at 3 a.m., we left our hotel in Koror and drove north. We followed a remote road in the pre-dawn dark, windows down, listening. At first, nothing. Then faint bird chatter began to drift in. We stopped, got out, and waited. Just as I was thinking about a plan B, I heard the rainbird. The tree line was about 100 yards away with tall grass leading into the dense jungle, so we started towards the sound. We walked a few hundred yards through the undergrowth until we were within 50 feet. Spies gave me a nod to go ahead, so I crept to the base of a large tree, directly beneath where I think the bird was perched. I set up my midside rig, aimed it high into the branches, pressed record, and froze. The call rang out loud and clear. It was the best signal-to-noise ratio I'd captured the whole trip. Back home in the States, I wanted to identify the rainbird properly. I started by calling my Uncle Jack, a dedicated birder, who suggested I reach out to the experts at Cornell University. The next morning, I emailed them an MP3. It bounced from one expert to another until it reached Greg Budney at the Macaulay Library of Natural Sounds. By lunchtime, Greg confirmed the bird's identity, the Palau bush warbler. He complimented the recording and asked if I'd donate it to their collection. I agreed, and that's where it lives today. So here it is, the Palau bush warbler, also known as the rainbird.
A sign in the Montreal region that autumn is coming is the sound of the bernache flying away this time of year. Bernache is what we call the Canadian goose in Quebec. On a weekend, while visiting some in-laws in the Richelieu region, I saw that they had a group of them over there. They told me they always stop by every year around that time. So on the next weekend, I set up some gear, wake up early, and set up on the side of the Richelieu River, wanting to capture some group sounds. There was a lot of them that day on the river, but most of them were in the center of the river. So I was mainly capturing some smaller group chit-chat and some faraway group sounds. After a while recording, I was getting cold, and I was about to wrap up to go get some coffee, and then everything was quiet. Thousands of birds taking off at the same time, flying around the area. It was a thing to see and hear. I felt so little in the immensity of this nature event.
Hi, Tim. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute to Tonebenders. I am early in my sound career and still on the fringes of the industry, and this show has reminded me for years that there's a whole community of people who care about sound just as much as I do. My name is Lucas Vitale, and my story takes place on a climbing trip in Laos. Surrounded on three sides by rock faces, this valley in Takek was rich with the sound of insects and birds all reflecting off the walls like a giant soup bowl. Fortunately, in addition to climbing gear, I had packed my Zoom F3 and a pair of clippies. But I faced a problem. The walls of the valley also did a stand-up job of reflecting the assorted grunts, screams, and hollers of the many other climbers in the area. I wanted a pristine recording of the natural ambience of this place, and the birds and insects were most active in the early morning. But climbers are early risers too, so I got up to record the hour just before the first light of the morning, when the climbers were still asleep, but the valley was very much awake. Because I was out so early, I recorded something I did not expect to hear. A rooster. A sound we're all familiar with, but in this wide, lonely space, it felt entirely different. When I hear a rooster, I picture a farmhouse, a weather vane, a pitchfork. Reverberating across the valley, I didn't hear a cartoonish trope. I heard a creature's song. A strained, desperate, yearning song. Funnily enough, though, there was a farmer. Later that morning, he drove past me on his motorbike. He had a little dog, too. Thanks for listening.
I love that I get to hear these sounds from places I might never be able to visit myself. Palau and Laos are places I would love to get to one day, but now I at least have an idea of how they sound. In part one, we got to take an audio tour all around Africa with recordings sent in from Kenya, Botswana, and Zimbabwe. It's really amazing that we get to hear all these sounds from all corners of the earth. Big thanks to everyone for sending all these in. So let's move forward with that international vibe and hear a few more submissions. First up, we'll hear from Udo Baumhögger from Germany and then Ryan Granger from Australia.
It was back in 2012. I had just moved into my new recording studio in Hamburg's Schanzenviertel. And one Saturday in July, I was there setting new things up. I still remember noticing how the sky suddenly grew dark, really dark. Back then, I was kind of obsessed with thunderstorms. I always tried to capture something exciting from each one. So I thought, we're in the middle of the city, but hey, it's Saturday. Maybe I can still record something cool. So here we go. I hit record and opened the window. At the time, my gear was pretty basic. Just a Neumann TLM 103, a small zoom field recorder and a regular but fairly tall mic stand. There was still too much noise in the recording, so I figured I need to get higher up. I climbed onto the windowsill and pointed the mic towards the sky. Luckily, I'm on the top floor of the building. Better. Maybe just a little higher. Even better. I was completely unaware of the danger. Very dark clouds over my head. Holding a metal pole in my hand, stretching it towards the sky. I reached the highest point I could find, which, in hindsight, was beyond stupid. But I was in the zone, chasing the perfect sound. And just a few seconds later, about 20 meters away, a lightning struck a cell tower. I was so close I could feel the electrostatic charge in the air. The tiny hairs on my arms stood up like someone had rubbed them with a balloon. The flash was so bright I had to blink, and it took a moment before I could read the recorder's display again. And the only thought running through my head, damn it, the recording clipped. I need to turn the gain down. I stood there for another 15 minutes and got a few very nice lightning strikes to add to my collection, completely oblivious to the situation I was in. Thanks for listening, good luck to you all, and don't forget to check your surroundings every once in a while.
My name is Ryan Granger. I'm a sound designer and mixer at Dead On Sound Audio in Melbourne, Australia. The sound that you're hearing is an iPad that was recorded using an induction coil microphone. The reason I set about recording these devices was I was asked to work on a sound design for an installation piece that was using a whole bunch of old discarded CRT TVs. A lot of these were collected from the artist and kept in storage. And when she decided that she was going to make the art piece, she framed them up and made them beautiful. Again, so that it was, these sort of discarded elements of society, and the pictures, were sort of like really, really beautiful. And I thought, well, it also might be good to include some sounds that we don't normally hear or we discard as society. And a part of those was the electromagnetic fields that were created by our electronic devices that we have all around us that we don't hear. So I found a place online that sold a modified electric guitar, coil microphone that plugged into a 3.5mm jack, and set about recording just about everything I could find in my house. Some things were pretty, boring sort of sounding, and some things were just truly horrifying. And I found the iPad that I'd been keeping next to my head most nights quite interesting, just from its sheer abundance of a magnetic field and what it was doing from just playing back a basic video or whatever it was that I was recording. So I've certainly become a lot more conscious about what I put in my head, standing too close to microwaves or turning devices off when I'm not using them, because the amount of electromagnetic fields that are being displaced around these devices was definitely an eye-opener. But it made for interesting sounds, and it also made for an interesting little library that I use for certain sort of interference or paranormal interference or some kind of like creepy displacements of electrical stuff in movies and things like that now. But yeah, hope it is nice to listen to. Thanks.
Induction coils are a great, cost-effective way of getting just bonkers sounds out of household objects. I suggest everyone try and have some fun with them one day. You just get some excellent, interesting discoveries from stuff just sitting around your house. Thanks to Udo and Ryan for those recordings. Next up, we have a quick one with an interesting do-it-yourself discovery that we can all probably keep in our back pocket for an emergency one day in the future. This is from listener Leon Regula.
Hello, Tonebenders. My name is Leon Regula. I spent my vacation on the Atlantic coast of France and wanted to record the ocean, but it turned into a little unexpected experiment. The wind protection unfortunately didn't make it into my suitcase, so I had to improvise. Inspired by my Rycoat Super Softie, I brought a dishwashing sponge, cut a hole in it, and put it over my capsules of my Zoom H5. And here's what that sounded like. I hope this little story helps you too someday. Have a great day.
Okay, we're getting close to the end of the recordings that were sent in this year. I plan to put out a call again in the summer for another round of sounds from people out there listening, so maybe start to think about if you have any recordings that might be a good fit. I also want to really encourage more women to send in recordings. I know there are lots of amazing women out there with microphones pointed at interesting sounds. So let's hear them. This next group features crowd recordings. The first is sent in by Anita Young. It's a great recording from the actors' strike a few years back, recorded in New York City. She sent in a script, so you will again be hearing my voice, but Anita's words. And it will be followed by a submission from Jan Dzyr in Poland. Hi, I'm Anita Young. This is a recording of the SAG after strike in New York City during the summer of 2023, captured in front of the HBO and Netflix headquarters on Broadway Street. I happened to be doing my annual trip to New York City, which was at the same time that all of America was having an actors' strike, following and in support of the writers' strike. As part of the industry myself, I felt it was a duty of mine to join these rallies. So for 3 days, I would join my friend or go alone to petition in front of HBO, Netflix, or at NBC at the Lincoln Center. Other rallies were happening all over the place at Paramount and Amazon and other big streaming networks and production studios. Armed with my Zoom H1, its mic furry, and extra batteries, I tried to inconspicuously stash my mic in the mesh pocket of my backpack while walking the picket line with SAG members, writers, IATSE members, and Teamsters. In the blazing heat, we were handed water and fruit gummies to keep us all hydrated and going. It felt like this was a really important time in the history of the entertainment industry that was worth documenting. This particular day you're going to hear now, they had a closing speech when other days they didn't. So I was really happy to have been there and capture it. There's hours of it. And hopefully one day I can donate my recordings to some kind of documentary or historical archives of sorts.
Hi, my name is Jan Dzyr and I'm sound designer from Poland. The sound I'd like to present was for me unexpected, but definitely not by the type of sound, as crowd sounds are a common part of our daily space. At the end of last year, I gone for a first bigger vacation since COVID, and as such I want to take advantage of a time to do some nature field recordings and planned the trip with the idea to record winds, birds, impulse responses, sounds that perform well in the natural and quiet space, for which I chose the Polish mountains, Sudety. On one day, the original plan became impossible. We wanted to reach Śnieżka, the highest peak of the Sudets, and soon we discovered that we were not the only people with this idea. Despite being in a remote part of the country, we had a lot of company on the road. The number of tourists was so high that with all those human noses, the only sound I was able to record was of a small stream going along the road. The only sound of the plowed ones, of course. After a long walk, the number of people rose so high that on the path to the last summit, we were climbing in an almost kilometer-long line of people. When we reached the top, I knew that the topic of my recordings needed to change that day. Śnieżka is a flat summit with a few buildings for the observatory and a bit of space to take a rest. There, 1600 meters above the sea, far from any big city, I saw at least 200 people taking a rest, speaking all sorts of language, mostly Polish, Czech, English. There were no cars, no planes, no sounds of the city, just a bit of wind and human voices.
Well, there you have it. That's all the sounds that were sent in this year. Thanks to everyone for taking part. I'm always nervous no one will send anything in. And then, of course, Tonebenders listeners always come through with something great. I'm already looking forward to the 2026 version of this listener's field recording project. There'll be a call out for submissions later this year. People in the Los Angeles area, please come out this Thursday, January 8th, to the very first Tonebenders Screening Series featuring the film F1 that will be followed by a live recording of a Tonebenders episode with the film's sound team. There's a limited number of seats and they are filling up fast, so please click the link in your podcast app's episode description to get all the details and to claim your spot right now. It's this Thursday, January 8th, starting at 7 p.m. at the Glen Film Center. I hope to see you all there. Talk to you soon. As the new year begins, Sound Ideas is offering its largest sale to date. For a limited time, receive 55% off professionally recorded sound effects and music libraries. This New Year promotion applies across their esteemed catalog, making it an ideal moment to expand or update your professional collection with authentic audio and a proven standard of quality. The Sound Ideas New Year's sale is available now for a limited time, so go visit sound-ideas.com right away. Tonebenders is produced by me, Timothy Muirhead. Theme music is by Jim Guthrie. You can reach me via email through info@tonebenderspodcast.com. Follow Tonebenders on Instagram to stay on top of new episodes. If you like the show, you can help us out by spreading the word to your friends and colleagues, or leave us a tip. Just go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click support.